Hi, neighbor. Welcome to We the Community podcast. This is your host, Amanda, or AZ for short. And today I cannot wait to share with you my wonderful friend and confidant, Kelly Wynne. Kelly Wynne is a therapist and former journalist with a passion for meaningful connection and transformative care, which I really think you're going to get to have an insight on today. Before entering the world of clinical psychology, Kelly built a career in media, writing for esteemed publications, including, are you ready for it? Newsweek, USA Today, and People magazine. Her voice first resonated globally through her viral essay, Anxiety is an Invalid Excuse, written during her undergraduate studies at the New School. A piece that reached, again, are you ready for it? 12 million readers and sparked wide reaching dialogue about mental health. Inspired by a deep desire to move beyond storytelling and into healing, which none of us were surprised by, Kelly earned her master's in clinical psychology from Pepperdine University. Today, she provides individualized therapy through both cognitive behavioral and existential lenses, tailoring her care to honor each client's values, questions, and inner world. Her approach is grounded in curiosity and is heart forward, much like she is, committed to nurturing those who are working to change the world, whether on a public stage or in private, quiet ways. Kelly believes that change begins in the smallest of moments, in the space between people, in the choice to listen, to care, and to extend kindness. Whether inside or outside the therapy room, she's an advocate for conscious, compassionate living. Please help me welcome Kelly Wynne as she walks us through how to make change, both big and small, and how to stay well while doing it. Kelly Wynne, my dear friend, welcome to the We the Community podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here with you. This is just great.
Of course, of course. And we are so excited to hear what you have to say. Kelly, you have lived so many lives. Can you tell us a little bit about who you were before you became a therapist and what made you pursue that path in mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my career as a journalist. I was in journalism for about 8 years and loved it. I started my journalism career by publishing a blog post on my own blog that I made from my college dorm room. It was called Anxiety is an Invalid Excuse. And I was 20 at the time. Went viral somehow, which was super cool, super intimidating. I did not know what to do with that. And I learned two things from that. The first was that people wanted to hear what I had to say, and that got me a lot of opportunities in journalism. The other thing that I learned was that I did not have the capacity or the knowledge to help people who were struggling with mental health. My DMs were full of people who wanted to know how to fix their anxiety. And, I was a 20-year-old college student who wrote this pretty vulnerable blog post just about living with panic attacks and
Mhm.
anxiety. And I didn't know how to fix it. I didn't have the answers. And I think that lodged itself somewhere in my brain. I kind of buried it. I dove into journalism. I moved around within that field. And there was always this itch of this, how do I pull this piece in? How do I bring up mental health when I don't necessarily have the opportunity in the types of things that I'm writing about? And it was always kind of in the back of my mind. So then I think as many people experienced during COVID, I kind of had this, what am I doing with my life moment. I remember very vividly being in the car with my mom, and I said to her, in another life, I would be a therapist. And it wasn't maybe for another year or so that I decided to go back to school and pursue it, but it had always been there. My love for mental health was always there. It was just kind of shadowed by the other things I had to do. And it was just kind of a spontaneous thing that I decided to apply and go back to school. and it landed me here, and I'm happy it did.
What was the moment when you said, in another life, I could
Mhm.
be a therapist? What was like the exact moment that you said, what about this life?
I love that question, and I don't have a perfect answer for you because I always say my best decisions come from being spontaneous. When I said in another life, at that point in my life, I thought that my own anxiety was too high to help other people. And I think during COVID, my mindset kind of shifted where I realized that actually could be a benefit. I have the experience that other people are having. Obviously, my experience differs from a lot of my clients, but I have an understanding of when you don't feel like you're okay and when you feel that you need to seek help. That was the state that I was coming from. And that shift, the first thing that happened was I was laid off from my job. My team was laid off during COVID, and I had already been thinking about going back to school. I didn't know what that would be for. And I said to myself, I've always had this itch to go into mental health. What I'm going to do is I found one program that I really like to become a therapist for clinical psych. I said, I'm going to apply to this one school. And if I get in, I'm taking it as a sign from the universe that this is what I'm doing. And I got in and I followed it and I don't regret it.
And what was that university?
Pepperdine, Pepperdine University. I really enjoyed it. I feel like it was a good education. And uh, yeah, it was one of those doors. I've done it a few times. I did it when I chose my undergrad school and I decided to move to New York within like an 8-hour time period. Not That's not when I moved, but that's how I made the decision.
Hmm.
And it was one of the best things that happened to me. I always say, for whatever reason, when I make these spontaneous choices, they go well.
I think that's great. It means that you have a really great gut.
Thanks. I like
Yeah.
to think so. And I think
Yeah.
that's important to listen to.
Absolutely. So, being a therapist requires a deep love for people. So, I'm curious, and it can be in recent history or as a child. When is the first moment or one of the first intense moments you realized you had a deep love for people?
I've always been the mom friend since I was a very small child. I remember even as a preschooler, like playing house at school, I was always the mom, and there was no discussion about that.
Hmm.
And I didn't necessarily know how that translated to a career. I think that especially as women, we see these things as just traits of like maternal sides or empathy or a love for people and community. And we just see them as personality traits rather than things that we can do to help people. And so it took me a really long time to realize that I could translate that. It really was during that COVID time period where I was like, I can use this to not only better myself and really align with these passions that I have, but also to help other people. That's what comes to mind when you say, when did I realize? I don't think I ever realized. I think it's just always been there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is a perfect answer because so many people collect these traits and these characteristics throughout the story of their life. And I think that in that life, you don't necessarily understand how it's all going to like snowball into something else.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the human answer is that
Mhm.
there may not be like, oh, I remember this one time that I was doing X, Y, and Z, but it's like I've noticed and I've gathered like all these pieces of myself
Yeah.
and it equals out to this thing that I'm trying to produce. And I can relate to that because for me, I always had feelings about something I wanted to do without knowing what the thing was.
Yeah.
And there's no
Yeah.
perfect way. So,
Sometimes it just presents itself to you. You just have to
yeah.
be open to it.
Yeah. I love that. I think that you touched on this a little bit, but in what ways would you consider yourself a leader?
I think we have so many, I don't want to use the word stereotypes, but I do think that we stereotype what it means to be a leader. And I'm talking from a perspective of like, I'm an Aries. I'm an April Aries. And when people hear that, they're like, okay, you are probably really energetic. You're really bossy. You're really vocal. And I think that's what I always associate like a leader with.
Mhm.
And I don't necessarily agree. I think the way that I am a leader is I know when to lead.
Mm.
Especially being a therapist, my job is to lead my clients through their healing. It's not to heal them. And I think that's something that a lot of people mix up, and I definitely mixed up too. A therapist isn't a savior, you know? We
Mhm.
kind of hold the lantern for them as they figure out what decisions they need to make, how they're showing up for themselves or how they're not. And I think something that surprised me is I feel the most like a leader when I'm able to sit back and listen. I'm I'm able to guide the conversations in a way that matter and can point toward change. But I think that there is a certain type of leadership in silence and attentive listening and really getting to know people on such a deep level that isn't what we usually associate with the idea of a leader.
I think that's wonderful because everybody has some kind of calling to lead something. I think there's like this feeling that people shy away from it because they don't have those traits and they
Right.
think that it's almost like imposter syndrome. Like, how could I be wanting to lead without these traits? And the answer is that there's just a different way. I really like how you explain that. You mentioned holding the lantern for people as they kind of find their way. We're talking a little bit about leadership, local leadership, leadership within a community. Can you kind of place us in this point in time? And with everything going on in the nation right now, there's a lot of, I think, skittishness that's happening because we have no idea how to hold our own lantern or
Oh,
who to
yeah.
hold it for. Can you explain, as in your professional sense of a therapist, how
Mhm.
you translate that to your local community, whether that's your friends, your family, your parents? How do you hold that lantern for those people during a time like this? And how can they maybe hold the lantern for somebody else?
I think that's such a great question, and I think the answer differs for different people. My answer would be different from yours because I have different skills and purposes that I can offer, whereas you will have different things that you can offer to your community and your loved ones. I think there's two sides of that, which is knowing your strengths and knowing where you shine and what you have that passion and that energy for.
Hmm.
And I think the other half of that is knowing what your community and the people around you need. So, the way that I show up for you may be different from the way that I show up for another friend or a colleague. We're all needing different things and different kinds of support. And I think in kind of holding up that lantern back to what I said about like that piece of listening is listening to what our community needs, listening to what our friends need, listening to what our loved ones need, and being able to either respond in that way or offer something else that feels like it's more within our wheelhouse because we can't do it all. I think there's so much pressure, especially when we feel uncertainty, to feel like we're doing everything, we're carrying every torch, we're showing up authentically while also being superhuman. And I think one of the best things that we can do is recognize our individual strengths and really lean into them rather than trying to do it all.
Hmm.
There's
Hmm.
a really, really fantastic resource that I love. It's called the Social Change Ecosystem Map, and it's created by Building Movement Project. It's something that I reference all the time with clients, and it teaches us that there are so many different areas that you can show up when you're trying to be a leader in your community. And like I use the term leader really, really loosely here. But it gives all of these different areas that you can step into. One is being a storyteller or a healer, a builder, a frontline responder, um, a guide, a weaver. And it's all of these different kind of boxes that you can find yourself in. And the point is that we don't have to fit all of them. There may be people that thrive in really using their voice loudly and sharing on social media and going to protests and marches. And at the same time, there are people who really don't feel comfortable speaking. I remember when I first learned about this, somebody had told me they know that their role is setting up the chairs for the meeting.
Mm.
And that really stuck with me, that the person that's setting up the chairs is also the reason why everyone is there. They're why they have a seat at the table.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I use with clients and on all sides of any aisle because finding our role can be really, really intimidating when we're in kind of a period where everybody feels like they're supposed to be saying something.
Mhm.
And it
Mhm.
it doesn't have to look the way that it does for your neighbor.
Yeah. I think that's very important to point out. There's a book that, as you were talking, I kind of remembered existed. It's called Micro Activism by Amkari
Mhm.
Williams. And it talks about the same type of things that you were talking about. Where do you fit in that cycle? Is your role setting up the chairs? And I got to see her speak at a conference recently. And she said that what we all have to realize is that no one piece is more important than the other,
Mhm.
because of the fact that if one of those pieces were to go missing, all the other pieces couldn't fall into place perfectly. And she
Absolutely.
used the example of MLK's speech um, in front of the Lincoln Memorial. And
Mhm.
she said that if all of the people in the audience didn't show up, right? If they just thought, oh, I'm just an audience member, I'm not MLK, what do I have to bring to the table? If they all stayed home,
Yeah.
that march and that speech wouldn't have existed the way it did, and it wouldn't have moved everything forward the way we needed it to.
Wow.
Sometimes people know their roles are just to set up the chairs.
Yeah.
We couldn't do the thing without the people setting up the chairs. So I really like that example.
Mhm.
I have a follow up for
Yeah.
you, for people listening that are looking for like a first step on how to, show up for people in their respective community, whatever community means to them. You mentioned listening. What's a good first question to ask to the person sitting across from you or the people sitting across from you?
I feel like I have a few directions that I wanna take this, but what feels the most accessible or the simplest is just being really honest with your communication and asking either what you need or asking, "Do these traits and these passions that I have a place at this table? Can
Mm,
I be of benefit to you?" And I
mhm,
I think with that, what's important when you're wanting to get involved in any way is knowing what you're passionate about. If you're somebody that doesn't love speaking, maybe you don't love public speaking. Maybe what you do is you offer to write a press release. There are different ways that you can show up and you can offer exactly how you want to show up in a way that's fulfilling for you. Because the thing that we also have to consider is, are we putting ourselves in a position of where we're going to get burnt out? Where we're doing so much and we're bending over backwards for our communities, for other people, for ourselves, just for the sake of saying that we did it,
mhm.
just for the sake of showing up. But I think what's really important when you're thinking about getting started is that showing up is customizable. Showing up is something that should be fulfilling if you're doing it the right way. And, shouldn't feel like you are spending all of your energy and all of your time, but is something that feels like a good addition to what you're doing that's fulfilling for you and for the people around you.
I want to ask, when you think about your journey,
Mhm.
what do you think is relatable to anybody listening who may also struggle with anxiety
Mhm.
in a space that is requiring or feels like it's requiring some type of change making or leadership on a daily basis?
I love that question. I think what is relatable, like you said, is that piece of anxiety. And in my role as a change maker, I see that as more person to person. I didn't necessarily see my role as a therapist as being a role of an advocate until I was in school, and I realized that these things are so intertwined and so hand in hand.
Mhm.
The people that I work with one to one, or whether that's individuals or couples, are going through really difficult times, and if I am able to help guide them even just a little bit and make their life even just a little bit easier that week, I am fulfilling that role and scratching that itch to help.
Mhm.
And my own anxiety almost stopped me from pursuing this path. And I think that's probably something that a lot of people listening can relate to, of you have this anxiety or this fear or feeling like your talents aren't good enough or perfect enough or don't fit the box the way that you've seen it portrayed. And I would just encourage anybody who relates to that to lean into that self-trust of there's a reason that you're feeling called to this. And you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to go into it being great. But if you feel that passion calling you to do something, the passion is always going to outweigh the anxiety. The passion and the anxiety may even go hand in hand, where they're trying to tell you something. Anxiety is a biological feeling that we have when our bodies are trying to tell us something. And we may be afraid of how we show up or how we appear or how good or bad we'll be at something. We also might just be a little bit afraid of what it means if we do it.
Mm,
And I always think it's worth the risk.
yeah. I think that you're never really ready, whether you struggle with anxiety in its full capacity of like this is something that is a diagnosis or you struggle with it in certain moments. I think something that's relatable to anybody who's looking to take any sort of risk, whether that's showing up at the food drive to, help count boxes or even just like hand off your food, or even just going somewhere to pick up that food, like depending on that level of anxiety, maybe it's really hard for you to even, make the time because of insert thing that's happening here or diagnosis that's happening here to go to the grocery store and pick up a couple of cans of food. I'm just using this as an example, and bringing it somewhere or giving it to somebody to bring somewhere. And
Mhm.
I think that you're never really ready to take that next step, whatever that next step is, but it's really important that you do it because
Mhm.
oftentimes that's a biological response. To your point, it's not
Mhm.
always a negative response. It could be a positive response. And I'm speaking from like an inexperienced, I'm not a mental health practitioner like you, but I just feel like that could also be a sign that like it might be time to jump. It might be time to do the thing. All these people you're seeing, do these amazing things that you're like, I could never get there. I could never do that. Or that's not my personality. They all had to jump. They all had to just take it
Yep.
and kind of say, we're going to do it because we're never going to be ready for it.
Zero way to predict how things are going to go. But if
Hmm.
you're drawn to something, you might as well give it a try. You can always take a step back. Nothing is permanent, everything is temporary.
Hmm.
Change is one of the only things that we have in this life that is constant.
Hmm.
And we're allowed to change, we're allowed to try things, and we're allowed to do that while we're afraid.
And I think that people do need permission sometimes to do
Yep.
it. So thank you for giving that to everybody.
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about the crossover between your life now, looking at it from a bird's eye view of what's happening in the world. So
Yeah.
I want to dig into a little bit of your time as a political correspondent. Can you give
Mhm.
us a little bit of background on when that was,
Yeah.
how that felt, some details?
So that was I'm gonna be so honest here. That was right when I graduated college, and it was not my choice.
Mhm.
So I got this role. I primarily worked in the entertainment journalism space, but at my first role out of college, I was working weekends, and on the weekends I was writing politics exclusively. And it really opened my eyes to not only the state of America, but the state of communication between people and between different opinions.
Mhm.
It was not for me. I have so, so, so much respect for anybody in the political space who decides to put themselves out there and speak, whether they're really trying their hardest to write unbiased or whether they are speaking their mind. Because no matter who they are getting messages that nobody deserves to receive. And from being just, like a 21, 22-year-old that was kind of getting my foot in the door, I think I've told you before, I knew that I was doing a good job being unbiased because I published an article and I got horrific messages from both sides.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, I think the takeaway from this is I did a good job writing it down the middle.
Mhm.
Um, which, was the goal. And it was really, really eye-opening to the strength of opinions and what people are willing to say to defend their point.
In what ways do you think you can draw a parallel to what you experience and what everyone else might be experiencing in this current climate? And maybe what are some things we can do to deal with that
Mhm.
discomfort?
Yeah. I think discomfort is the perfect word. We're in a time period where things are so polarizing, and I think a lot of people are afraid to have conversations across the aisle.
Hmm.
And that's not unwarranted. I mean, the everyday person may be completely able and willing to have those conversations, but typically the voices that we hear seem the most intimidating to us.
Hmm.
And I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing. However, what I will say is I hear from so many people, whether that's in my professional life or my personal life, that just logging online, going onto social media, turning on the news is really, really draining for them. And I think that's the biggest point in my brain right now is how do we approach life as we need to, as feels authentic to us, in a way where we're energized and we're ready to do it?
Hmm.
And that's the question that I don't have a perfect answer for. I think, again, it's a very customizable answer and it leans into how do you show up and what is fulfilling for you, as well as when do you save your energy and how do you refill it?
Absolutely. With all the division and partisanship that we kind of just touched on,
Mhm.
how have you seen that show up for your clients on both sides of the aisle? What are some type of conversations that you're having that people are
Yeah.
struggling with?
Change. I think that is the one word that really bridges everybody is whether or not you are excited about change or you're fearful of change, it's inevitable. It's inevitable in any administration in any time period, but the conversation is very ongoing in my therapy room. There is a natural discomfort that comes when we feel that we're losing control over something. And I think it really speaks to resilience and trying to find that resilience in our own way, in our own font, because it's the thing that comes out of change. It's the thing that we have to look back on our individual lives and notice it. It's hard for a lot of us, but the only reason that we're sitting here today having this conversation is because we've been resilient and we've gotten through
Mhm,
change. Change
mhm.
doesn't stop us, it just redirects us. And I think that is the word that keeps coming to mind and to my therapy room. No matter what emotion you partner that change with, it's very prevalent. And, it always is in a way. Um, but that feels like kind of the universal tone of adjusting to the shifts that are happening. And like you said, it's viewed very differently from different perspectives. And as a therapist, it's my job to allow the space for that and embrace that for people. And so hearing the same topic in completely different conversations is always really interesting too.
It humanizes the experience, it almost feels like,
Yeah.
perhaps. Whichever side of the aisle you're dealing with, likely the common individual has the same feelings as the opposite person. The general public, I think, can agree that everybody experiences some kind of anxiety when it comes to change, some kind of
Yes.
excitement when it comes to change. I think that's something too, that excitement when it comes to change, whether it's positive or negative, excitement and exciting doesn't necessarily mean it's positive. Something
Yes.
can excite you in a way that, it could be something bad happened and you're excited by it, meaning that you're having a response to it and you're wanting
Yeah,
to move in some way towards it, away from it, whatever it is. I think that's just a human piece of it too, is that the gut reaction that excites you or like raises your feeling in some way could feel the same potentially if it's positive or if it's negative. It's a universal kind of human feeling.
absolutely. Yep. You said that so gracefully. I loved that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Thank you.
you.
I'm picking up on your cues. So,
I'm gonna say, have you
um,
considered being a therapist? Because
nah, next career change. Yeah. Um, Coming from my personal belief system and my
Yeah.
side of the aisle, I think that there is a piece of me that is ready to move and activate in a way that I never felt before. And that's exciting. Like, I might not be excited by the things that are happening right now, but it excites me that we're seeing people mobilize. It excites me that people are starting to speak up. People are starting to realize that they have their own skills, like you noted,
Yeah.
um, that they can make a difference, that they want to make a difference, that they're going to set up the chairs at that event, or
Yeah.
they're going to talk to a good friend, or try to reach across the aisle. I'm not excited
Mhm.
in its positive sense, but it excites me to
Yeah.
see that, like, there is zest
Yeah.
that is coming through in this time.
Can I ask you a question that I think could be
Sure.
interesting?
Sure.
Okay.
Are we going to therapy right now? Am I in
No,
therapy
no,
right
no, no,
now?
no. No, this is just I think that your response to this could just really add to the conversation too, because we're talking so much about how we have these roles and we have to find them and find our passion. And obviously, we're here. You are using your voice, you're making change, you're involved in your community in such a powerful way. I'm curious how you leaned into that. Were you anxious? What helped you find your voice?
Oof. Um, there are so many ways that I want to respond to that. I think it was a long time in the making. I grew up always being like a choir kid and a theater kid, and
Love it.
I think that that really allowed me to use my voice, B, be a team player, because I was never consistently like the lead. I had to like set up the chairs, you know what I'm saying? Meaning like
Mhm.
I was in the chorus, or, I'll never forget getting casted in Beauty and the Beast, and it literally said like knife next to my name. And I was just like, "Ah," like I was just so upset about it. But it taught me to use my voice when I needed to and was asked to in a lead role. And it also taught me that if I'm out of step in the chorus, that, that takes away from the entire production.
Mhm.
And so I think that like going through those feelings of feeling like I wanted to be heard so badly but not being heard, but knowing that I had a place and a time, and just having to kind of like go through the motions, it taught me like a type of resilience I think that I brought into other things in so many different aspects of my life. I think I've been an underdog, maybe not always like seen or appreciated or understood, whether that was in my personal circles, my family circles, friends, you know in my activities at school, in school in general. And I think it just builds this grit that you start to just be able to say things. And it's really scary. Like the first time you say something that may not be received the way that feels comfortable, it's a very scary thing. But the more that you do it, the more you kind of deal with it. And I'm not going to say it's not painful when it's not well received every single
Mhm.
time,
Yeah.
but the amount of time you spend in that pit of like, ooh, that was painful, starts to like kind of shorten
Yep.
every bit. So you're always kind of taking it on the chin, but it hurts less a little bit each time. And so I think that it was just a a beautiful gift that I was given. And I just think it would be a shame not to use it, or only use it when it was comfortable. And I think that's why I said earlier, the snowball effect of like not always understanding what's happening or why you have certain traits. Um, but knowing that it's going to lead to somewhere
Yeah.
is something that I'm just learning now at 30 years of age. Like I didn't make it to the stage. I didn't make it to the movie set. I didn't make it in any of these places that as a young child, I was like, oh, I want to do this. And I never understood, oh, well, what else could be out there that relates to these passions of mine? And it kind of all came back to community and activism and being an advocate and policy work and all of that. And so, um, yeah, I think you just have to do it. You have to build some grit, rub some dirt on it, and just jump right in. So,
I love it. That's incredible.
thank you. Yeah, I didn't know I was going to go the theater kid route when I said I have a lot of ways that I could say
Yeah.
this, but it builds skills.
I think it's perfect. And I also really just love the parallel between we always talk about like making a seat at the table and like you were the knife. You already had a seat on the table.
I was on the table.
You were on
Like
the table.
I didn't need a seat. Like you're using me. You're welcome. So, no, that's great. I mean, that's so wonderful that you asked that. So thank you. I
Yeah,
also
thank
want to give
you.
a nod to just I think there's something so powerful about where you come from, not
Mhm.
meaning like place or time, but specifically who, whether that's biological or
Yeah,
nurtured.
yeah.
Um, I think that that's really important. And I had been so blessed with some very um, force of nature type women in my life. My grandmother, my aunt, my other grandmother too may not be the force of nature that you would think of when you like see it in a dictionary or hear about it,
Mhm.
but she came from another country with nothing. You know, there's certain things in my family that I feel like I've just been very blessed to be like handed through DNA
Mhm.
some of these skills. So that's the last thing I'll say about that.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing.
Thank you for asking.
Anytime.
I want to ask for people out there that are dealing with this change and trying to identify how they can stay well during this time.
Mhm.
What are some ways to identify some triggers and how can we deal with them in a productive way?
I think it's about how well you know yourself. And that's not me saying you need to know yourself and love yourself really well to know your triggers. It's knowing when something changes in your body. So, something that I work on with clients a lot is well, there's two things here. With some clients, it's where do we feel that in our body? How is this conversation impacting our body? What is changing? Is our heart racing? Are our fingers feeling a little bit tingly and weird? Are we starting to sweat? For me personally, when I have really bad anxiety and I'm going to have a panic attack, my ears start ringing. There
Mm,
are physical signs for a lot of us that something has changed.
hmm
It can also totally just be mental, where, I was with friends having this conversation and all of a sudden I'm getting a little bit snippy. And so, in noticing that my mood has shifted, I'm taking steps back in the conversation to see what did that to me and what was said, what body language was present. At the same time, understanding that these triggers are saying something about me, not about the people that I'm with.
A follow up to that would be, and maybe this is more prevalent to some people than it is to other. For instance,
Mhm.
in my line of work, I'm often going quite literally toe to toe with somebody that may not be agreeing with me. And I think that a lot of times that can feel internally like you're losing something or like you've lost a battle or that like you're giving up on the thing that you believe in by taking a step back. And I deal with this in so many different environments. And so my question for you would be how do we like code that in our brains that this is a protection mechanism so we can continue to do the things and say the things we care about by in a certain instance stepping back?
Yeah.
How do we process that?
I think knowing it and really feeling and believing it are two different things. And you can know that and you can remind yourself of that. It takes time before that is just implemented and you're feeling totally cool and calm and okay with having these conversations that can be really difficult.
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of helping people tap into phrasing and reminders that feel really unique to them that you can carry with you. And I think, again, that's something that's really personal.
Mhm.
Um, like it could be a mantra, it could be um, a routine that you have after a conversation like that that grounds you back into yourself and into that passion and that belief that I'm here for a reason. I'm at this table for a reason. And I know that going to this table is not always going to be peaceful, is not always going to feel great, but I'm doing this for a purpose.
Mhm.
And I think to your point of showing up in any capacity, in leaning into these passions that we have, I think that when we're able to figure out the way that feels most authentic to do that, we have to remember to lean into the fact that we're doing it authentically and be proud of that.
Mhm.
But it's hard because there's not an easy answer that says in a situation like that, I'll no longer be triggered.
Yeah.
I think that there is a big piece of it that comes with acceptance of this is something that I signed up for.
Mhm.
But
Absolutely.
at the same time, it's also okay if you're a person, and not to say you specifically, but it would be okay if you were this person too, where you sign up for something like that and you realize that it's more detrimental to you. And maybe that's not the role.
What if it's happening in your family, friend groups,
Mm-hmm.
places that you didn't necessarily sign up for it?
Oh, yeah. Um, Here's where we bring in our first really big keyword, if I haven't said like self care already, of boundaries.
Mhm.
But boundaries are not at all to tell someone else how to behave. It is stating how we will behave. And I think that's the piece that gets lost in our social media translation of boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah.
Boundaries is not Uncle Jim, you can't say something racist at the Thanksgiving table. It's when you do, here's how I'm responding. And I have a right to do that because I don't want to hear this.
Mhm.
I think that is where things get really, really difficult in boundary work because we expect an instant change when we set a boundary, but a boundary is not specifying that somebody else has to change. It's specifying how we will respond, how we will remove ourselves, how we will react.
I think that is so important because I think sometimes it comes from a place when you wanna change the other person or you wanna say, like, "Here's how you should have said that," or "Here's why you
Mhm.
shouldn't have said that."
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we just, like, want better for that other person. We just, like,
Yes.
want them to see the light, so to speak, in
Mhm.
certain situations. In other situations, that's not to say that, like, you're not wrong, the general you. But I think that sometimes that reaction comes from, like, I don't want you to agree with me because I wanna be on the same page. I want you to agree with me because I want better for you. Like, this is not the
Yes.
person I know you to be. And I
Mhm.
think that's where it gets really, really hard to set a boundary and know exactly what you're saying, that like that is just a stipulation on how you're going to respond. I want to go back and I want to try an exercise if it's okay with you.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So you mentioned that in those situations,
Mhm.
it's different for everyone. Like mantras are different for everyone and they're kind of tailored specific.
Yep.
Can we like go through that right now? Like you can build
Yeah.
one for me so we can
Ooh,
provide an example for the listeners of
okay.
how they could like go through this practice on their own
Mhm.
if they're not able to meet with a licensed practitioner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Let's see. I feel like with a client, I would know, like, kind of some of their specifics already, and with you, I obviously do, but from a friend perspective. So,
Okay.
tell me why you choose to show up the way that you do.
I think that I audibly have a loud voice.
Mm,
And I think that I've been given other skills along with just, being loud and a little boisterous, whether that's being able to phrase things well or not being scared of public speaking or things like that, that allow me to show up the way I do. And unfortunately, I have not mastered how to turn it off in a friend setting or a family setting. I kind of tend to just like withdraw instead.
mhm.
Um, so I kind of show up that way, but like what you see is what you get. Like you're going to get it if I'm in front of the mic at a city council meeting, but you're also going to get it at the dinner table.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a
Mhm.
challenge of how and why
Okay.
I show up the way that I do.
Okay. What are you most proud of in that room?
I think that I'm proud of the fact that I have values and morals that recognize the humanity in situations
Yeah.
that other people maybe can't recognize. I'm never proudest of, oh, I said that really well, or like, oh, I met that person. That was super cool. Like those are all like really awesome details I'm able to collect and memories I'm able to collect. But at the end of the day, if I'm like going and I'm like writing about what I'm most grateful for, it's
Mhm.
going to be about the fact that like I feel very confident in the head that's on my shoulders.
Yeah, I love that. I love just that as a mantra. I'm very confident in the head that's on my shoulders. But we can also take it another step further, which to me would be what is your goal in showing up in your community in that space?
I would be lying if I said it wasn't to convince people
Mhm.
um, of whatever I'm trying to convince in that moment.
Yeah.
But I always do it from a place of wanting to humanize the thing that's on the other side, whether that's in my current capacity in like working in affordable housing, whether
Mhm.
that's talking about, you know, hunger and food and do we have enough food to feed people, whether that's talking about the fact that like people need to be our priority, not profit, and how do we like figure that out as a nation, as a local town, as whatever it is.
Mhm.
um so my goal is always to just like bring people back to people and humanity, of whatever we're talking about, and never to cast anybody out because of insert reason XYZ.
Mhm.
Um, so my goal is to convince people, but not in a selfish way. I want to be right. It's to convince people that like humanity is not a sliding spectrum. It
Yeah.
is just
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah.
And that we have to treat every situation with that.
What is a room that you feel comfortable in, and how can you bring that with you to every room you enter?
Hmm. I feel comfortable in very specific knits of like friend groups. There
Mhm.
are certain friend groups that I just feel like, okay, like I am safe to be 100% who I am.
Yeah.
Um, in like my private life. In my professional life, um, I've been very lucky to interact with some electeds that
Mhm.
I align very closely with, and it feels like I'm talking shop and we can just chat and we're all on the same page. And that there's going to be some like positive movement in the direction we're trying to go towards. So
Yeah.
those are like my two examples, personal and professional.
Okay. Out of all of those answers, was there anything that you said or that kind of came into your mind that felt really especially close to your heart?
I think that, and let me know if I'm on the right track.
Mhm.
And for everybody listening, I think that when I think about that answer,
Mhm.
there's like two tracks, and
Okay.
one can be combative and one is not. So the
Yeah.
combative one is I want to bring everybody back to humanity, right? And to
That.
people. And
Yeah.
that's combative, right? Because now I'm trying to like convince you to think that like I'm trying to like battle you on
Mhm.
what that means.
Yeah.
But the non-combative one was the one that you had said, like, I feel very confident about the head on my shoulders. And that is something that is like, that is completely within my control. Whether you come back to my reasoning on the topic at hand, like that, that has
Yeah.
nothing to do with the head on my shoulders. So for the sake of this exercise, I feel like the right answer for me would be the non-combative comment.
I don't think there is a right answer. I think that there's a place for both of those, and they're both serving you with a different energy, maybe on a different day in a different conversation. And one is not better than the other. They're both parts of you that are the reason that you're showing up with the passion and the energy that you do.
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of the point of finding something like if we're calling it a mantra that it gives you that energy, it gives you that validation that maybe you're not going to get from everybody in the room. But if you're able to give it to yourself, you're showing up for yourself in a way that's going to maintain your mental health, your drive, your passion, and allow you to tap into that energy and also allow you to rest because you know that you're doing the work you need to do.
I love that. So maybe it's not I'm trying to bring everybody back to humanity, but it's I always bring myself back to humanity.
I
And
love
that's
that.
important. So if we're going to sum it up for the listeners, I would say like the questions that you asked me, like write those down and reflect on them because those were all like positive questions. You didn't ask me anything negative there. You asked me to reflect on all positive things. And then from there, pull out what made you feel the most like yourself. Is that a good way to kind of sum it up?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so, and I think as we naturally like, if you're writing and you're journaling about those things, there's going to be things that come to mind that don't exactly fit the question, and I never ever want anyone to shy away from that.
Mhm.
The questions that I ask, whether it's in a therapy room or it's in this conversation or it's in a friendship, they're there as a guide. Again, like holding that lantern, but it's absolutely okay if your answer has nothing to do with the question and it just opened a different door in your mind.
A follow-up to that, you use the word rest, and I wanna ask you a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah.
Rest is really important for everybody, but I'm talking a little bit more right now towards those traditional roles of change makers. So I'm talking to the government worker, the nonprofit worker, the activist, the organizer, maybe the grandma or the aunt or the mom that's like fielding all of these questions and dealing with all of these personalities in her household that are feeling all of these different ways, to the traditional change maker.
Mhm.
Can you explain the importance of rest
Yep.
and maybe how to find it in a world that is just asking so much of you to show up?
Yeah.
I'm just like thinking of all these nonprofits that like all of a sudden with all of these cuts are just going to have like so much weight
Yep.
on their shoulders.
Mhm. You have to be willing to show up for yourself the way that you're showing up for the world around you. And I know that a lot of the time you probably feel like you don't want to do that, or it's taking time and energy away from the places that really desperately need it right now. But the only way that anybody who is in an advocate role is going to be able to continue showing up to their full potential is by recharging and resting and making sure that you are prioritizing your own well-being. And that
Mhm.
could be the things that are like so natural, like eating the right amount of meals a day for you, or making sure that you're showering that day. Like it can be the basic human needs. And that spectrum also goes to taking a night off and watching a new show that just came out, or going on a date night with your partner, turning your phone off and not reading the news for the night. We all need a reset. It's about
Mhm.
balance.
Mhm.
And, I've met very, very few people in my lifetime and in this line of work who don't need that. And if you are one of those people, that's incredible. I have so much respect for that. But the vast majority of people need to ground themselves into themselves in order to be able to recharge enough to give the proper amount of energy back to the communities that need it.
Mhm. I think that's so hard for people to wrap their head around when they're constantly in like the mode of I have to stand up for something or someone,
Mhm.
or I have to be the one that's if I don't do it, who will do it, I think is the hard part.
Mhm.
But burnout is very real, and if
Mhm.
you cease to do it because you've run yourself into the ground, that's really when you can ask the question, well, then who will do it?
Right.
And that's like the big picture that I think people have to keep in mind that are just running at whatever that goal is or whatever that outcome is that a break and rest is not saying that you're not going to finish the race.
No.
But if you don't break and rest, you may not finish the race.
Right.
Um,
Makes me think of like a phone battery. Like, do you want to show up to the race with 100% because you took the time to charge before? Or do you
mhm,
want to show up for a consecutive week with your phone on 10%, borrowing chargers all week, just trying to get through it?
mhm. Yeah. I think too, and maybe you can talk to this in a professional sense, but I think something I've has happened to me in the past that I've experienced is that I think I'm resting, but it's a result of burnout, whether that's
Mhm.
emotional or physical. Um, whether it's because my brain has been stuck in a certain spot and I can't snap out of it, telling myself a certain story in my head that's happening or not happening. And I think I'm resting, right? Oh, like I took a break, I watched a comfort show, or I saw a good friend, or I had my favorite food, or took the famous girly everything shower, whatever it is.
Mhm.
And I'm like saying, "Oh, I rested." But I am not rested. Those were reactive versus proactive. How can we identify which is which, proactive and reactive?
There's definitely a difference, so I'm really glad that you point that out, and I think that difference is it depends kind of on the state of time that you're in. There may just be times where that rest is not as easily accessible. But I also think a big piece that I'm unsure if this relates to you, but I think it probably will to some people listening, um, allowing that rest. Fully stepping into that, knowing that you are setting down everything else, being able and making the effort to set down the things that are on your mind. And, there's a thousand different paths that I could take in telling you how to do that. And that, again, is very personal. But like my own thing is when I have something that is on my mind that I cannot let go, I'll write it either in the notes app or on my phone or in a journal and shut it. And when I leave the journal to the side, I'm literally leaving what I'm thinking about there. It's
Mm-hmm.
like using those thought stopping techniques, allowing yourself the space from the things that are on your mind, knowing that you will pick them up again. But I do think that there's a piece of really having to learn to give permission to set it down fully.
Mm-hmm.
Also, to your point of that, you're going through these motions and nothing seems to be helping. You're not resting, even though you're doing those rest activities. That in itself can be a sign of burnout, where we're just
Yeah.
stuck in this cycle where even when we're trying to kind of fix things or fix how we're feeling or allow that space to rest, when we're already operating from this level of depleted energy, we may, it might not be that one TV show or that one shower that fixes it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So if we're building a system of
Mhm.
like how we're going to address potentially burnout, the fact that you need rest, the fact that you may be confronted with so many differing opinions on a daily basis, whether in your household, with your friends, whatever it is. If we're building our own rule book on how to prevent that and how to address it, it sounds like so far what we've covered is making sure you have some kind of mantra to
Mhm.
come back to in uncomfortable positions or conversations. The second thing being identifying that you need to fully put something away and putting it away no matter maybe what's on your plate and what's happening. And then the third, I want to ask, how do we address the third piece, which I think personally is the guilt of putting it away?
Mhm. Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it starts with asking yourself why you feel guilty. Why don't you deserve rest? We often operate, especially people who are in this field and in a field of being a helper or a healer or an advocate, we feel that everybody else deserves something from us or needs something from us. And my question to anybody who's struggling with that guilt is what do you need and what do you deserve? And if your answer is I don't deserve it, then why? Because when you're showing up for everybody else, you need to refill that energy, and unfortunately, you are responsible for doing that.
Hmm.
It falls on our own shoulders to heal ourselves and fix ourselves and feel that we are fully in touch with who we're supposed to be. And a big level of that may be how we show up to the outside world, but there's also a piece of that in that authenticity of how we show up when nobody's watching. How are we
Yeah.
showing up for ourselves and how can we get more comfortable in the confidence that we deserve to do that and that time is sacred time with ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's so much power in ritual. I think rituals are really important and something I found to be really important
Mhm.
because they ground me in my day no matter like where I am. I was in this state of total burnout and like
Mhm.
total emotional recovery and needing to
Mhm.
emotionally recover that I was like, I will not give up
Yeah,
my AM and PM rituals. Like
I
they are
love it.
coming with me.
Good.
um and like obviously not everything can come with me, but there are like ways to take your pieces of your day with you that like make you feel most at home.
Yeah.
And I have found that it's a slippery slope between being like, oh my God, I don't have everything I have. This is going to be a disaster. And like, just like leaning into the fact that this is like a different version of that ritual.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that's really important is like building out what makes you feel at peace, particularly when you try to start your day. And then when
Yep.
you try to like lay your head on the pillow to like truly get that like traditional sleep rest.
Mhm. That speaks so well to something that I know my clients are so sick of hearing me say, which is, "What can you do today to feel more like yourself?"
Mm-hmm.
And I think that piece of what makes you feel like you is so crucial that we're incorporating into every day,
Mm-hmm.
especially when, and this is speaking to any person in any career, our society is asking so much of us in how we show up and how we structure our routines. How can you go through a day that feels stressful, even if it's full of things that feel a little bit meaningless to you right now, and you still feel like yourself, even if that's for 5 minutes? What are you doing in that 5 minutes and why is it important to you? I feel like that conversation comes up all the time for me of what is in your immediate control.
Mm-hmm.
We all are guilty of getting swept away in anxieties and thought processes of just figuring out what how we feel about something, what we can do to change it, and half of the time it's not in our control.
Mm-hmm.
Spending time within your control is crucial. And of course, there are things that will fall outside of it that matter. But when we can, like you said, kind of ground yourself into routine and ritual in a way that allows you to feel that you have some control, I think that's a beautiful thing.
Kelly, I want to ask for people who may not have the ability to seek professional help,
Yeah.
what are some good resources to get that we can perhaps link for everyone, whether it's an app
Yeah.
or a worksheet or something like that? If you are either A, new to the mental health space, or
Yeah.
B, just cannot have your own mental health advocate right now.
Yeah. I think something that we can all do is identify the people in our lives that we trust. I think that it's important to identify who, your first call is if you're having a bad day. And of course, there's a difference in having a mental health professional that um, is unbiased and is objective and also is somebody that, I always consider therapy as like the one relationship in your life where it is 100% about you. Like
Mm-hmm.
0% of my therapy room is about me. Sure,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there's some self-disclosure and my clients know me on a specific level, but that is a space that is 100% for you as the client. And that's a little bit different when it comes to any sort of other relationship. Um, I would recommend if somebody is looking for mental health support to seek sliding scale opportunities in the community. A lot of mental health care professionals will offer more affordable sessions just to make things more accessible. I think that's really important. Um, Also, it's a mental health app, but it also is just like a to-do list, which I know I've shared with you that my clients are loving lately. It's called Finch. And it's not going to fix your mental health completely, but it's a great way to reward yourself, like we said, for like those little rituals, the goals, to keep track of the things that are really important to you. And it also does have a part of the app that is all like a mental health toolkit. So, breathing exercises, panic attack support, reflection prompts on mindfulness, things like that. And it all comes with a little tiny bird that you get to feed your goals to and watch grow. And it's very cute. But I think that that's a fun one that's accessible and just kind of offers a little bit of lightness to the day as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Where can we start to find like those sliding scale professionals? Like, do we literally just Google it? Can you give us kind of like a tip and a trick on how to find that?
Yeah, I think at least for me, the easiest way to find providers is through Psychology Today. So they have like a provider network where you can go and see people in your area. You can use your zip code. And then typically on profiles, they will say if they have sliding scale or what insurance they accept.
Okay, that's great. I have some final questions for you that we ask everybody. So we're going to dive into those. So, final thoughts, Kelly. I
Yes.
want to ask, who are one or two leaders you most admire and why? And they do not have to be traditional leaders in the sense
Okay.
of like a historical figure.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm. Yeah, they're not, but, one of them is my mom, and that is because my mom has this energy about her where my whole life I've just been in awe that she can talk to, like, the cashier at the grocery store who seems to be in a super bad mood, and by the time her bags are packed and she's leaving, they're laughing. I think just being personable and being, like, sunny is such a
mhm.
wonderful trait in our world, and I really admire that about her. I think that's always stuck with me.
What a gift.
Yeah, it really is. And the other one, which I hope that it's okay that I say, but is you.
Oh,
I feel like you are a constant in my life in terms of helping me reach my full potential just by watching the way that you advocate and you inspire others and you prioritize the things that really matter to you. I think everything that you do is so incredible and well thought and powerful. And that and just our conversations, whether it's this one or it's one-on-one, like, it just unlocks a certain door in the way that I'm thinking, and
oh,
I really think that you have taught me a whole different side of leadership.
wow. You're going to make me cry, Kelly. Oh my gosh. Thank you. I think that's probably the largest compliment anybody has ever paid me. So thank you. And
Oh,
it just I hope that I think the biggest hope I could have in this life is that the door unlocks for somebody I'm talking to.
yeah.
Um, I don't think we can do any of this work alone.
Mhm.
And I don't think that any one person in this work is more important or worthy of doing it. And I think that the moment that leaders in any regard, whether it's like, you're an expert in your space and in your topic, or you're a leader on like a larger stage,
Mhm.
until leaders realize that, like, we cannot begin to make the strides we need to make towards where we're going. And so thank you, because you just
Mhm.
solidified that I'm doing something right in my circles.
Yes, you
So
are.
thank you.
You are absolutely doing everything right in your circles from my perspective. And I'm not in every circle that you're in, but speaking to the sides that I have seen, I think it's inspiring and I'm very, very grateful to be around to
Oh,
witness it.
thank you. Thank you so much. I'm gonna stop there because you will make me absolutely just cry, and then we won't get through the rest of it. But thank you for your kind words, and the feeling is absolutely mutual. When I was thinking about this podcast, I was like, Kelly's like the person that people need to hear from, because you give permission to people on so many different levels and so many beautiful ways to just be themselves, but also like take themselves seriously enough to
Yeah.
know that like they are worthy of whatever they're needing in that moment. So I think you're the perfect person for the work you're doing. For everybody out there, Kelly and I share mutual friends. And the moment she said, like, I'm going to be a therapist, we all just went, like, ah, yes. Okay. Yes. That makes perfect sense. Like, do that. That sounds good. So, that was absolutely a light bulb moment for us in your life that got to witness you through it. So,
Thanks. Well, I'm here because of you guys too. I mean, like I said, I had a whole lot of anxiety in taking that jump and that spontaneous side of me, I feel like I applied, I got in, I started telling people, and the some of the people closest to me were like, You did what?" And it was,
mhm.
the rooms full of people that were like, "This makes sense. Why did it take you so long to get here?" That I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay, this is the right path."
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's more than the right path. And I'm sure everybody can hear that.
No,
Um, I want to ask, where do you see your career taking you in this
definitely.
field? What is 40-year-old Kelly up to?
Oh, I hope she's having a good time.
Yeah.
I I'm really excited in the not knowing. I have 2 really strong passion areas, which are, chronic illness and trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and, my heart is really with those parts of the field, so I can't imagine that I won't be involved in those. Um, but I also think I'm open to seeing what the community around me needs, where the need is, and I'm also open to seeing what 40-year-old Kelly needs.
Mm,
What does that look like as I grow and I evolve? What new passions do I discover? And what new talents for serving my community do I find? So I think I could give you like a whole list of like, if I get a PhD, it'll be this. And if I ever live here, it'll be this. But I think I'm starting to find more comfort the older I get in the not knowing, and
mm-hmm.
knowing that that means that I have a path of creativity and authenticity ahead of me.
Mm-hmm. The not knowing is so uncomfortable, but it's so powerful.
It's so powerful. I know,
Mhm.
and that's I just if anybody takes anything away from this, I hope it's that sometimes the unknown or that change or that discomfort is the best thing that's gonna happen to you,
Mhm.
but you have to be willing to meet it where it is.
Yeah, that is relatable in so many different areas of people's lives right now, I think, like, personally, professionally, with everything going on in this
Yep.
landscape, I think that's gonna resonate. I also just wanna pick on one other thing you said. You said, "I'm open to knowing or understanding what my community needs and what
Mhm.
skills I have that allow me to show up for my community."
Yeah.
And I think that if you're in a place where you are trying to understand where you can participate in change, those are the questions you need to be asking yourself.
Yeah.
But like your community is vocalizing that they need help, maybe with something that's like totally left field,
Yeah.
of what your passion is, instead of going like, oh, I'll just find somewhere else where I can do my passion, though that's a valid route to take if
Mhm.
that truly is where you think you can give.
Yep.
But like perhaps you look at the skills and what makes you passionate about, your preferred cause, let's say, and like how
Mhm.
you can translate it into like what you're hearing
Yeah.
your community say, I think is really important. It makes you versatile. Um, it allows you to learn and grow. And it allows you to make connections, and you never know who you're going to meet in that space that says, you know what, this actually is a problem and I know who to send you to help, or, those connections are really important as well.
Yeah. I think that's great advice.
We're living in really uncertain times, and I think it's really natural for people to operate from a place of fear. But I think the message generally needs to be one of hope. So, what is your advice or your lesson on staying hopeful for the future during this time?
It's a big question. I think I would encourage everybody to find the good, whatever that means to them, and look for it all around you because it's there. I think we fall into such patterns of doom scrolling and looking into the sun, and that is where the fear sparks. And like you said, fear is it's a big conversation right now. And it's
Hmm.
a I can't say a universal feeling, but it is a feeling that a lot of people have. And there's only so much within our control.
Hmm.
So focus on what is within your control, focus on your community, focus on the good. Where do you see the good? Is it sitting outside in the sun for 10 minutes in the morning? Is it the hot cup of tea you have in the afternoon? Is it the exchange you have with your neighbor at the mailbox or a joke that your friend makes that really sticks with you?
Hmm.
Find whatever that good is to you and pour your energy into that. Take it with you.
That's such valuable advice, because it's everywhere. I think that's the key thing that I'm hearing from people that deal with even the most negative um, of situations or are dealing with populations that are experiencing so much is that they will all tell you there's still good everywhere and to
Yeah.
look for that. So I
Mhm.
think that's really valuable.
Yeah.
Kelly, what legacy do you hope to leave behind for yourself?
I hope that I am able to provide an opportunity for others to find their worth, to find their self-love, and to find the acceptance that we all have things that we go through, that we deal with, and it doesn't mean that you're wrong or something is wrong. If I'm able to impact even just a few people to believe that they can fall deeper in love with their life or with themselves, then I've done my job.
That's beautiful.
Thanks.
You're welcome. And last but very, very not least, how can people find you, interact with you?
Yes.
How can people stay in touch?
So you can find Chicago Center for Behavioral Health where I work on it's our Instagram is therapy in Chicago. That's our handle. And that's probably the best place to interact with me. Yeah,
Perfect.
of course.
Well, Kelly Wynne, thank you so much for being on the We the Community
Of
podcast. I can't
course.
wait to share this all with the world. And I'm sure that people are going to be very eager to get in touch with you. So thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun. And
Good.
I'm so excited to listen to every episode you ever make. And it's going to be great.
We're going to clip that sound bite and make sure we put it everywhere. Hey, neighbors. Thanks for tuning in to the We the Community podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. It really helps us out. You can follow us on social media on Instagram at We the Community Pod for updates, behind the scenes content, subscribing to our email list, our book list, and more. Got a question, comment, or topic you want us to cover? Shoot us a message or email at wethecommunitypod@gmail.com. Until next time, stay curious, be kind, and keep listening. Catch you in the next episode.